Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. So this video is about Donald Trump's recent comments on Medicare and Medicaid at a rally in Indiana, and it'll lead me into a more general analysis of the state of play in American politics. So there he was addressing a crowd of his fans and saying that we mustn't allow the Democrats to win these elections in November, the midterms, since if they do, they will take away Medicare, Medicaid, and use the money for socialism. And he was cheered by some of the crowd. It was a most staggering inversion of the truth. It was a bit like saying, they'll take away Christianity to make you believe in Christ. Medicare and Medicaid are socialism. They're the very definition of socialism, where tax is collected from everyone and it's used for a purpose, which particularly helps people on low incomes. The very wealthy, they don't have to rely on Medicare and Medicaid so much, so it's especially useful for those on more modest incomes. That is socialism in action. Some people have forgotten where these programs come from. It's governmental healthcare. It is socialist. It's what you have in almost every other Western country, and they would also allow private healthcare as well. So it was typical of his hubris and trying to bifurcate society to set Americans at each other's throats. Remember, Bill Clinton used to say he was a uniter, not a divider. Well, Trump's the other way around. So Trump's word salad on oration was anything but eloquent, and he peppered it with far-right talking points and appealing to basis prejudices as usual. So his willfully ignorant crowd cheered him to the echo. So these buzzwords such as socialism, they provoke a gut reaction in his supporters. Trump's an acidulous person himself and will react with ire to certain things he doesn't like being said about himself or others. So I wonder if he's got a similar reaction to certain other words. I know leftists do some of what Trump does as well, seek to divide society. So if I was producing a video about the left in the United States or other countries, I would also excoriate them. But obviously Trump is almost uniquely rebarbative amongst Occidental politicians. And Trump spends his time fussing over symbols or gestures such as these football players kneeling during the national anthem before games rather than bread and butter issues. I actually happen to agree that they shouldn't do it, but I don't think he's actually called for them to be outlawed, just for them to be dismissed. But that's not really going to improve anybody's quality of life, even though it's disrespect to the national anthem. So what he likes to do is push through tax cuts for billionaires, and it has given the economy a fillip in the short term. What's so moronic about him is he ought to be harping on about that, about how this has stimulated the economy. And he has talked about it a bit, in fairness to him, but he ought to talk about it non-stop, because certainly in the short term, that is his best possible pitch. That should be a selling point. I've made you all richer, and I have speeded up economic growth. But because he's so foolish, he's talked about other things which don't look so good for him. His government is palsied by the lack of appointments. Dozens of ambassadorial posts unfilled, well over a year and a half after he was sworn into office. He's redolent of King Lear. You may know the Shakespeare character based on a semi-mythical king of Britain in prehistoric times. Trump's tragicomic, and there must be some sort of court jester to keep everyone's spirits up. Who was that? Possibly Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She doesn't seem like a very droll woman. Maybe it was Scaramucci the Mooch. Well, only for about a week. Because it's a very unhealthy situation where everyone has to be obsequious towards someone who thinks he's all-powerful, Trump, who thinks he can rule by fiat. But let me talk more about the parallels between King Lear and Trump. Well, the wife is absent. Okay, dead in Lear's case. In New York, in Trump's case, might as well be absent as she's an elective mute. The children vie to be his favourite, and they're going to get more inheritance depending on which one of them loves him the most. And they're all blindly loyal, kowtowing to him, just like his staff. Thing is, even though Ivanka Trump has in the past publicly disagreed with things which have then become presidential policy, especially towards women. So Trump, like King Lear, goes in for these very lengthy, rambling screeds and is incoherent. He's completely losing it. But wandering around on stage, he cuts a very melancholy figure. Obviously, the differences can't be pressed too far because King Lear has got some sense of duty and family values. So his plaintive rants are often about how, he cares about his family, but they don't care enough about him. I mean, Leah would not say, should be dating my daughter if she weren't related to me. But anyway, you look how Trump is losing his mind with his mispronunciations. All right, everybody mangles words sometimes. I mispronounce some things sometimes, and yes, I can speak English, but my enunciation is fairly clear. But if one's going too fast, if I'm anxious about something, I sometimes misspeak. But Trump does it an awful lot. Anonymous, like anonymous. Get it right. And the crowd didn't judge it for him, like tweeting very early in the morning with these misspellings. Is he dyslexic? He may well be. But even if you're not, use spell check. Or if you're dyslexic, seek help. Get someone to see that it is correct, because it's highly embarrassing. It's not just about you, Trump. It's about the United States as a whole. You are the leader of the largest Anglophone nation in the world, and it's a disgrace that you should publish these things with spelling mistakes in them. People judge your country by you. If you can't write properly, we think that you're stupid, that your nation is stupid for having elected someone who either has a low level of literacy or a complete disregard for accuracy. That's what it bespeaks, just this complete indifference to the truth, because we're in the post-truth age. He explodes in rage over the tiniest thing. There's a lack of self-discipline. We might have called him criminally insane a couple of generations ago. It reminds me what Bill Clinton said about Trump about 3 years ago, when it was far from obvious that Trump was going to win the Republican nomination. That Trump is fact-free, and indeed that's true. And obviously it reflects very badly on the Clintons that they took his money and they were chummy with him in the past. Remember way back in the 80s, I believe there was a rape case in New York City, and several adolescents were accused. They were all minors, African American, one was Hispanic, I believe. Trump took out adverts in the newspapers saying that these children should be executed, which is staggering. No one has been executed for a crime less than murder in the United States for decades. They should be put to death. Anyway, they all turned out to be completely innocent. And didn't it prejudice their trial to do that? So it was nauseating. So the Clintons and others knew exactly what sort of person he was, just how vicious he was. They had this macabre fixation with the death penalty, with wanting to kill American children for a crime less than murder, and took his money anyway. He's vile. So he constantly says things which are completely untrue. There's projection. He is the mass manufacturer of fake news, or accuse others of that. He's outright dishonest time and again. Such chutzpah to call other people liars when he is so mendacious himself. But how can Christian fundamentalists go for someone who's so fork-tongued? Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, so saith the good book. Someone who bragged about his adultery, well, on those sex tapes, is a sex criminal, self-confessed one, boasted about the sex crimes he's committed, used to have New York newspapers write about his extramarital affairs. Marla Maple says Trump gave her the best sex she ever had. That was a headline way back from the 80s. So he's not at all contrite, and no sinners should be forgiven, but he's never asked forgiven. He doesn't admit the truth. He's never asked forgiveness, and he's never been the least bit repentant. He's made no attempt to amend his ways. So he is vile. And if he really is against socialism, why not close down the Veterans Affairs Department? Because that's socialism. That's taking money from everyone and giving it to them. Oh, but they served in the military. Well, I don't care. You get your salary, that's it. Why should the military have all this free stuff when nobody else does? But they serve the public, which is a fascinating reversal of the Republican philosophy. You usually think the public sector, those who are paid by the taxpayer, are terrible, and far worse than the private sector. Oh, bureaucrats in Washington. So what, civil servants are necessarily bad? Or is it Washington is what people are prejudiced against? So anywhere else the public sector is bad. Oh, we don't like the teachers and their unions. Okay, but how come the military are uniquely exempt from this and they should get free education, even when it's not relevant to their career? Remember when I was at Oxford, there was a US naval officer doing a degree in English. Obviously, it's very praiseworthy to study, but what's that got to do with being a naval officer? Pay for it himself, why not? So they're the ones who get a cushy job because it's patriotic, because they're in uniform serving the nation. Well, everybody with a job serves the nation in a sense. I know the military serve it in a different way and they put their lives on the line a bit more, but so do firefighters. So do teachers, I suppose. They get shot in school sometimes. Things like that. So do the police. Anyway, such chutzpah of Trump to accuse others of dishonesty when he is so utterly dishonest himself. And he's so brazen about it. He never apologizes. He never admits that he misled the public. He simply moves on to the next lie, keeps changing his story. So some of his purblind supporters will forgive him well nigh all. They've chosen sides, and that's because they burnt their bridges. They don't want to admit that they've been chumps. They've been had. They've been conned by a man who's a blatant fraud. So, and if you believe Trump's promises, I've got a bridge to sell you, as the saying goes. Such mendacity, such chicanery from Trump has seemed to be a magical formula for the elections. He never gets his story straight, such as the Mueller probe. It keeps changing the official explanation. The witch hunt, well, witches don't exist, although many of the Christian evangelicals will probably believe that witches do exist, whereas lots of people have been convicted. So there's no witch hunt because they really are guilty people. Anyway, so what will happen in the midterm elections? I suppose I'll speculate on that next time. I don't think the Republicans do that badly. Probably narrowly lose the Senate by 1 seat. Narrowly lose the House of Representatives. Trump's 14 percentage points behind the opinion polls. I don't think any president's ever been this far behind and gone on to be re-elected. However, Trump has broken precedents time and again, so I would not take his defeat next time for granted.